And welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrity. Today we have Anisha Menezes with us as our researcher celebrity, and she is a freshman in computer sciences at Texas A&M University. With this brief introduction, I'll say thank you so much, Anisha, for taking time out for this conversation, and we look forward.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so we always start these conversations that how and when you decided that you want to become a researcher.
So in my high school senior year, I took a course called AP Research. And what this did was it allowed me to investigate any topic I wanted and create my own research paper over the course of the year. For that paper, I chose to research how music impacts the working memory and how that's different in gifted and non-gifted students. Essentially how neurodivergent students worked differently with music as compared to non-neurodivergent. This was really interesting to me because I got to work with a lot of human participants, and being able to actually develop my own research gap and then from there actually create new information in the world was really exciting for me. And so that's why I decided that I wanted to continue research as soon as possible.
Lovely. This is at very early age when you decided that this is the field which you want to go. So you have done any of the what do they say, that foundational background work, that okay, how it tastes like to do a research, because you mentioned about this project which you already done in the school. You might have already tasted a little bit of like ups and downs of research, not a lot of that, but when you're committing for a degree plan and looking at research, because even at early freshman stage you already have 2 papers published.
Yes.
So that shows a lot of enthusiasm which you have for research. But were there any tough decisions to make that when it comes to a degree plan or pursuing a plan where if you are doing in research, there is a lot more you can do in computer sciences?
My only concern is that right now in computer science, the field is very oversaturated with AI content. However, that was what I was interested in. And so I've chosen to focus more on cybersecurity with a little bit of emphasis on AI. That way I can differentiate myself and give some more attention to areas that aren't as focused on currently.
So starting from the human patients, like music impacts in especially gifted childs or not, and then cybersecurity, how do you think that these two fields in research will go together?
In cybersecurity, I am very focused on the human side of it, because that is actually the most vulnerable part of any safety online, is the human aspect. For my first paper, I published it on AI and phishing attacks from the human and from the defender and attacker side, and we were really looking at how if humans were able to discern if an email was a scam or not, if it was written by AI. And we found that humans had a lot more difficulty discerning that when there was AI generated because of the specific information about them as compared to a mass email in the previous eras. And so from my previous research with human participants, I was able to use that sort of psychology and that human element again in my new research. Instead of just this time going less from music focus to more of a computer science focus, and how the way we present things can impact how people perceive them.
Lovely. And there are all these quotes when people talk about different languages, that how one is more suitable for computers than other. And here when you draw these parallels of music with computers, and this is for all the audience, that when people think of cybersecurity, the first thing we all start thinking of is computers and all those. But where Anisha is doing is like putting that human side into it, that can you actually find it out that if the email which you are going to open can be a scam or phishing. So if you can tell a little bit more about that paper.
So essentially what we found is that from the attacker side, a lot of phishing email attackers have already implemented AI in their scams. That is to say, they've started using AI to generate these emails because one, it's a lot cheaper for them in the long term, and then B, they can actually personalize each email individually for thousands of people. And that makes it a lot harder for scanners to detect if it's AI or not, or if it's phishing email or not, and it makes it a lot harder for humans. Humans, when they're inundated with emails every day, if you see something with personal information, you're more likely to believe it.
Yeah.
And so what we determined was that most companies are choosing to focus on increasing their employee awareness programs rather than the actual detection methods, because the humans are the ones who are ultimately the weakest link in the security chain.
Yeah, and you mentioned about these employee awareness program, because at the end of the day, no one can hack or do anything with your system until you click that link.
Yes.
Absolutely, that is the most you really put it really like the phrase you use, the weak link in the chain is human. So when you see that, okay, with all the research you have done in these two for these two publications, how you see that over the period of time when you are about to graduate, you see a research program in it or your efforts into it, and then we'll talk about that from where we will go. So for this duration of the graduation, how you see that you will develop a research program and over the period of time that how it will mature.
So I actually conducted this research under Shreyas Kumar. He was my CS 120 professor, and I think the second week of my first year semester here, I went up to him because he gave a presentation on his cybersecurity research, and I said, I would love to work with you. How can we do research together? And from there, we've actually developed a research lab called Aggies. It's called Aggies Lab, and that's a lab that's focused on AI and cybersecurity. I think we're about 30 to 40 members strong. We have about 5 papers published, even though we've only been a real lab for about a semester. And so I hope that this lab can keep growing and keep producing papers, because it's been amazing working with Professor Kumar. He is such a great mentor, and he really helped me kind of took me under his wings, because it's hard publishing a research paper as a freshman, especially. Although I did stuff in high school, I had no idea what to expect at the college level. But he took me through the whole IRB application process, what it means to apply to different conferences, how to get in contact with people. He helped me through that entire process, and he ensured that my vision became a reality. And so I'm just really grateful to him for that.
No, and I think this is one of the most crucial part for any researcher, the role of their mentors.
Yes.
So this is for the audience, as Anisha just mentioned, the role of mentor is so important that they should be able to see the capabilities, all the strengths, and then navigate them, channelize, because at this point of time, what we all need is this channelization of the energy and in the best possible way. And for the audience, Professor Shreyas Kumar has already been our researcher celebrity, so if you want to follow and enjoy that conversation, you can always go to that link in there. So talking about this setup of the lab, as you mentioned, the Aggie lab, you said it's not been even a full semester yet, and there are already 30-40 publications out of that lab.
Yes.
How you all made this happen?
Well, it's a lot of undergraduates in this lab, which is really interesting because none of us are fully paid research assistants as most labs would have. But because we're undergraduate students, we're all doing this because we want to. None of us are doing this because it's required for our master's or PhD. We just have a love of learning, and we just have questions we want to explore. And so because of that, each person has taken on their own individual passion project, I suppose you would say, with groups of 1 or 2 working together. And Professor Kumar just guides us individually on these projects and helps us create whatever we want to see in the world. So the reason we have so many papers published is because Professor Kumar isn't really telling us what to research. He lets us choose. He says, what do you find interesting? What are your questions? And he helps us investigate those to the best of his ability. So yeah. Yeah,
and this is again one of the important characteristic of any mentor, that they never force their ideas onto you. They are always open that what are the things which you are more interested in, what are the things or research ideas that you are passionate about and want to do. And as you mentioned about Dr. Kumar, that he is one of them. So when a newcomer, like because all of you are freshmen, and if they want to join a program like your program, either lab, or they come up with the idea, how this entire system works, that is anyone has to be of computer science, or this lab is open for everyone with an idea where they can utilize AI and cybersecurity?
Sorry. So I think right now we are a bit at capacity for our lab, but next semester I'm looking into starting an organization called Aura. It'll be Aggie Undergraduate Research Association. And what this is going to be is it's going to be a place for undergraduate students to come in, and we're going to create a community like what I had in the Aggie lab, where you can have mentors to help you develop these ideas and conduct research even at the early stages in your career. And so we're hoping that will be just not computer science, but maybe like aerospace and finance and like all fields with a bunch of different types of mentors. That way we can keep producing research at such a young level or a young age, but in all fields.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where when we start talking about of interdisciplinary sciences and the research, where people from different labs and all together different disciplines come together, and then one person might have no idea when they are talking about bugs, or like okay, so the same term when a computer scientist think about, they are talking about the coding bugs and all those, but when a person from entomology come, they're talking of different bugs like real life creatures. So when they come together and then start talking of bug versus bug, so that will be a like a great program, and especially when all these young enthusiasts, these brains come together, they can do miracles. We all know that part. So you already see a program developing after this semester, and then you mentioned that it will be open for all the other ones. If there is one thing which, as an advocate for this program, if you have to tell students what that one thing will be.
For my program, or just in general?
In general.
In general, I would say don't be afraid to contact professors and cold email them. I know it's awful to do cold emails, but you really just have to put yourself out there and email as many people as possible. And if you have an idea, you can go ahead and conduct research on your own. If it is something that doesn't involve human subjects, you can go ahead and analyze pre-existing databases, especially for computer science. You can develop your own software. You can do a lot of things that will have a prototype or a rough draft of your research before you even try to publish it or make it something with another professor.
How difficult is this? Because when we do wet lab work, there are so many failed experiments. But when we do talk about the computer science programs, how difficult troubleshooting is, or even to start with that, okay, if something is not working, why it is not working?
I would say usually the problem is you don't understand what you're doing, especially as an undergraduate. Sometimes you just don't understand the stuff you're working with, which is when a mentor is really helpful. But even if not that, if you can find like a peer or a friend to help you work through it, usually a second set of eyes is really something that can be like, oh, you missed this here. Usually in computer science, it's one line of code, one missed semicolon, or something like that. So that's why working in teams or pairs is always much, much more efficient than working by yourself.
Absolutely, and we always say that research in any field is a teamwork, always. And you also emphasized on that, that how it is even more important. But when we do talk about this research at so early age, like undergraduate research, people, until they are ready to commit, either after their like bachelor's or master's, when they say that, okay, now we are ready to do PhD, because for most of the world, that's how they start seeing research as that, okay, now because you are enrolled in PhD, you are more committed to research, and probably that's what you are going to do. But at early stage, like even in the undergraduate research, when you are seeing, so what is the basic difference if you see, because when you are working with your mentors and your team, when you see that the master students, or if there are any PhD students in the cohort, that how they have developed as researchers, and what are the things you think that, okay, I learned this today, I want to implement it tomorrow, and then I'll see that how this helps me in, in a long run.
I would say one of the things I've learned from the older members in our lab is the ability to put yourself out there, like for conferences, for research conferences, if they don't accept you, that's all right. Usually we apply to 2 or 3 at one time, and any feedback they give us, we take and we run with it. We are very receptive and open to feedback, and not being afraid of rejection, I think, is one of the hardest parts, because I am such a young person in this field, because it's so new to me. Any rejection I got initially felt very scary and like, oh, this is not for you, you have to wait till you're older. But being able to accept that the rejection isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just feedback on how I can make this better, is something I had to learn and grow with. So I think that's one of the main things I've learned from my older members, is being able to roll with the punches, take feedback for what it is, and not become discouraged.
Oh, and I think this is so the path you are taking is where it will take you is the perfection, because for all the researchers, failure is very integral part of the research. And you mentioned about these networking conferences and feedback. These are so many, like this goes a long way when you start networking at early stage again. And then what it gives you these resources, which sometimes what happens is, like, you might be limited by computational resource or some other resources or even expertise in some of the way. But when you have developed these networks in these conferences, and you have people all over the world now connected with this technology, now the world is just one single dot. You can communicate with anyone in real time now. And these scientific meetings, annual conferences, these are the places where you see you have this opportunity to have this human aspect of it, as you mentioned about all of your research. We do talk about computers, but then at the end of the day, there is a human somewhere sitting, developing all those codes and these research programs. So you have this interaction, like an opportunity to shake hands with a real person who you know that you are following their research work with, either their research papers or their patents, because this is more, or even the pipelines. When we talk about the computer sciences, that this pipeline was developed by a person you always were mentioning in your references, and then in these conferences now this person is standing in front of you and you're like, wow. Those moments, I have had all those moments long time, and even now when you follow those. So when at this stage, when you have already attended some of the conferences and then published the paper, how it feels like an established professor or a senior professor coming to your presentation and then appreciating it?
I always have to get over the imposter syndrome at first, because there are these very qualified people who have been in the industry for so long coming to see my presentation. I almost feel like I don't fit in, like I'm not good enough, but they're all very nice and they're all very supportive of people getting into research at a young level. And so it's really amazing, their insights into my project and what they can add to it with their years of experience. And like you mentioned, being able to meet people whom you've referenced in your paper is just such a cool experience, to like finally put a face to the name and shake their hand. It's really amazing. And it is, I really enjoy working with people all over the world. Like we've met so many people in the industry who have liked our research and want to implement it in their company. And so those kinds of connections are invaluable, and it's amazing that I'm making them as a freshman in college.
Absolutely. And this is for all the audience there, happen to be the young researchers. Never be afraid when you have an idea, because now what happens in the field of research, there are two wings. One thing, that never share your idea, people will steal it. I never followed that path, but again, I respect the people who followed that. And one thing is, like, nobody can reproduce your ideas in their real world, because even if you share a word, a document, or a sentence, or a conversation explaining your idea, you have more than that in your head going on, which is physically impossible to share with anyone or even to write it, because at that age it is only an idea. When you start working on it, that's when it all develops into one of those things. Another point which you mentioned about imposter syndrome. We have done this series for over 3 years now, and I can say like more than 80 to 90% of our researcher celebrities faced that, they still live with it. So when you mentioned about it, let me tell you, the early you can kick it out this thing, you'll feel more comfortable. And once you do not have that feeling, probably you'll help others who are facing that. And then now you're like, I was there, I have walked over it. And all in these conversations, this is what we talk about. We do not discuss a lot about the research. We talk about the journey of researchers, the challenges they faced, and then how they overcome it. And imposter syndrome, I think, is happened to be the most important topic for all the researchers all around the world. They think that they do not belong here. And that is good, bad, ugly. It depends on your attitude. But for the young researchers all around the world who are listening this conversation, when Anisha says that she felt that imposter syndrome, but that feeling of shaking those hands were so like, okay, for that you can kick out anything.
Yes.
So I think that's how you start kicking out these imposter syndrome, by facing or feeling that acknowledgement. And another part of this is like, when you met these people, they gave you the insights, which obviously at this early stage you cannot, and with the experience they can input. Sometimes what happens is people see that as criticism. What were your experiences when people came to give their feedback, which might or might not be like, how did you take that?
Usually people, because our ideas were in very early stages when we presented them, they were just very intrigued by it. But when they did have some sort of criticisms, I just did my best to, like I said earlier, roll with the punches and just accept that criticism. Because ultimately no one is trying to tear down my work from a place of malice. They just want my research to be the best it can, as do I. And so whenever anyone gave me feedback or criticism, I tried my best to incorporate it into my work and keep that in mind going forward. Especially if it's with my poster design or how I presented something, that is something that is inherent to me as a researcher and something that I want to improve upon as soon as possible and keep as perfect as possible in the rest of my research presentations. So that's how I usually dealt with criticism.
And I think that is the best way. For everyone, there is no age for taking criticism. That is one thing, let me tell you that. And the better way you handle it, and as you mentioned about, because they are there to help you, to tell you the shortfalls of the research and how the impact of your research can be implemented in a broader way. So if you look with that positive attitude, A, you will not get frustrated. B, you have something to work towards now, then and that will enhance your research. The second part of that is, you have to also see that what are the limitation or the scope of your study, because someone might suggest you something which is beyond your scope of research for at that point of time. So you always draw this fine line saying that, okay, I'll take in all these comments and work on it, and I'll keep this for the future research, because as we say, that research is never ending. You do something today, you develop fundamental rules or foundation for something else bigger in the near future. And that's how we all are always in the business, always working. So we do talk about the criticism already. Let's talk about, or the tip of the iceberg, when we say that something is not working. The hypothesis is completely failed. How you dealt with it. This is too less of a time, but how we at Empowering Science Foundation and having these conversations with researcher celebrity all around the world see that is, every single minute, every single hour, every single day you did research is valued, and all those moments when anyone felt bad, disheartened, frustrated should be acknowledged, so that people who are feeling or facing those emotions now while listening to this conversation can come out.
I would say the most important thing to keep in mind is that even a failed hypothesis is a result of some kind. because you have a research gap, no one knows anything about this specific area, this specific niche. And so even if the outcome wasn't what you expected, that is still something that you can add to the literature, something that you can say, hey, no one else should come after this, should research this, because what we have found says that this is a dead end. And that kind of closes the book on that niche. But there are so many other ways you can branch off that research. Just because this one specific hypothesis failed doesn't mean there's not some way you can take that data and reanalyze it, or take all this literature, all this work you've done, and reshape it in some way to explore a different topic.
Absolutely. No, I think this is the way how everyone should look into it. And for the and I think for this I can say it is not only for young researchers, but for all the researchers. Even if you are a PhD student or a postdoc listening to this conversation, the lesson learned is whatever the experiments you have done, if there are no technical flaws in it, because that is something which anyone can, get sorted as and when they see, and they can figure it out. If you have done everything perfect, as Anisha mentioned, you have already published it, then you have put this word into this community where whosoever wants to do that, if they encounter your publication, they know that, okay, probably this is not the path, or probably this is not the way how to answer a research question. They might develop their own programs, pipelines to do what they really want to do, but your efforts are acknowledged when they say that, okay, let's not do this. All your hard work is valued and is going to help them so that they do not face all that failure, all that frustration which is it brings, because we always talk about the stress in research. I firmly believe that stress is unavoidable for any normal, regular human being in their day-to-day life. But especially for researchers, when it comes to meeting deadlines, like you have published paper, you get revision. So there is this deadline when you have to meet that, okay, you have to submit the rebuttal in that time. Probably, yes, that is fine for your mentors, like for all the senior stage researchers. It is like, okay, you are supposed to submit a manuscript or a grant application. These are the things when stress is kind of like, again, it depends that how organized you are, because research is mostly about your organization. If you are a person who do not procrastinate, which are very less of us, because that is human behavior. People think like, okay, we still have months to complete it, and then all the days are gone, and then you are on the deadline. You start wrapping up and pushing it in there. So you are at the perfect stage to learn all of this, what not to do, because research teaches you what to do and also what not to do. And this is something which you will only learn with your own experience. But when I talk about acknowledging and celebrating, you have 2 publications already under your belt. How did you celebrate that?
So what I did, Professor Kumar took me and my partners out to sushi to celebrate, but long term, what we did is it just helped me, A, get over the imposter syndrome, and B, just kind of prove to myself that I can do research, I can conduct research, and it gave me a lot more confidence moving forward. Like, I already have 1 paper under my belt, I already know the process. At this point, I have learned the ropes somewhat, and now I can focus more on getting deeper into the research I want to experience, and less on the minutia and the actual day-to-day stuff of what it means to publish a research paper.
This confidence is the most important, ingredient in everyone's life, but researchers needs a little bit more, because at times when nothing is working, this is the only thing which keep them going. Sometimes this publication which you are just enjoying and nourishing, this impacts you in your later stages when people start expecting this out of you. They're like, oh, you have published so well in the past, now suddenly what happened? And this phase comes in everyone's life when you have this gap where either everything is in the pipeline or you haven't had anything published during that time. So that's when when you are building this status of yours, always be mindful for others as well as for yourself that there will be days, there will be times when manuscripts come back with those comments which is tough to sometimes digest, because the reviewer might not be the best reviewer for your work, and this happens like quite often. And then when you see that, when you read those comments, and then you're like, wait, this person doesn't even understand this, who's commenting on this, that how I cannot do this. So these are the things which you can easily digest. And the second one is like, when you know the expert have their own opinion, either it is about the references, about the methodology, or even about the results, that how you have not done the interpretation in the right way. All of those things come together whenever it's finally accepted and published. What people read is what they see. What they do not know is what has happened in this entire process. And now, as you mentioned, that this is also one of the reasons which gave you confidence that, okay, now I know how it feels like to have an idea and to get it published. It goes a long way. A lot of number of hours need to go into it, and then there is no shortcut for the success, for sure. Speaking of all of this, we do talk about teamwork. We do talk about, like, the challenges, the failed experiment, the criticism. One thing which I want to know your thoughts on, that when you start talking to your peers who are not from your field, or to your parents, when you explain your research to them, how that conversation goes?
It is usually a bit hard for me to work out how much technical jargon to use as compared to how to put it in layman's terms. A lot of people do get confused as to the nuances of what I'm doing. And people really like to see results or tangible apps or products they can use. And so when I explain to them this is just research, this is a theory, I haven't actually produced anything that you can use, people are a bit confused as to what is the purpose of what I did. But I just try to explain to them the best way possible what research is and why my contributions have actually made an impact in the community. So that's what I try to keep in mind.
Yeah, so now people start talking about translational research, like what they want to see is either a service or a product,
yes,
as you mentioned. But what most of the people are still not aware of about the fundamental or the foundational research you are doing, because you are laying these stones on which someone else, or probably in future you yourself, can build a beautiful castle, and which everyone will appreciate. But that takes a lot of time in there. So communication is another part where common people see researchers as, the most common way people see researcher as like all those images of Einstein.
Yes.
Haphazard hairs, not very organized, or if we talk about Darwin with the long beard.
Yes.
What are your thoughts of researchers as stylists? Because in this series, we call everyone as researchers celebrities. The idea is to celebrate research, but researchers as individuals. Your thoughts of researchers being called as celebrities?
I don't know if I'd call us celebrities, but I do think researchers should be celebrated for what they do, because it is a lot of time and effort put in that you often don't see behind the scenes. Like you mentioned, all you see is the finished product, is the paper, and you can't see all the late nights working, all the failed experiments, all the stuff you had to look into to find that research gap. So I do think I really appreciate this podcast and what you're doing, celebrating each researcher for his and her own journey and how they got to where they are, not just the finished product, but the bumps along the way.
The idea behind all these conversations is to develop a network, a pool where people can come together from all these different fields. As you mentioned about the program, that Aura, that where all the interdisciplinary people will come. So with Researcher Celebrity series, what we really want to do is make a global network of researchers, give them their secure, happy space where they can interact without thinking of anything else, where they feel that, okay, they belong to this community, they have people who have gone through the same challenges, who have succeeded, and starting from a mentee, as in like as early as undergraduate researcher as you are. And this is to mention that you are our youngest researcher at this podcast.
Thank you.
In this series for over 3 years now. And the idea is to give a mentor, a mentee, and a mentee as a mentor, because it goes always both ways. There is no way that how early you start, your mentor is always learning some things from you when they are giving you their all these mentorship. The things which you have learned, how you see that will help you becoming a mentor.
I think under Professor Kumar, I've learned a lot about how to guide someone without giving them all the answers, because he was very good at making sure that we were the ones learning and that he wasn't having to do everything for us. But we also felt like we had him supporting us. And so I think when I have mentees in the future, I'd like to adopt a similar methodology of letting them research what they want and supporting them, but letting them make their own decisions and letting them experience the process as independently as possible so they get that first-hand experience.
Absolutely. And I think this is the best way to mentor anyone, as you mentioned, that guiding them without giving them what all it takes. Just give them dots and train them to connect those dots, because then different people will come up with different products, ideas, and that's how you train a researcher for their future. Independence is another important part, that the early you get in this feeling of that now you can do independent research. It is always good for the program, for the person, and everyone in the system. You haven't had, but you mentioned that you have a team of like how many in your undergrad research program?
So there's about 30 of us.
30 of you.
Yeah, but I don't work with all of them. I would say for my first paper, I worked with another person. His name is Sarthak Giri. For the second paper, I worked with this team of about 4 or 5. The main other co-collaborator was Gari Agrawal. But yeah. So
you have worked with a group of 4 or 5 mostly, because another important part of researcher's life is the lab environment, the team environment they're working with.
Yes.
Sometimes these toxic environments keep people underperform. They could have done better if they are in an environment which is conducive and which is helping them, or where we say that, okay, everyone is supportive. So your thoughts on that?
I would say I personally have never experienced a toxic research lab, which I'm very grateful for. But if you ever find yourself in that kind of situation, I would say try and get out of it as soon as possible. I know it's hard to leave a research lab that you've been with for so long, but if you feel like you are not performing at your best, or you are in some way being hindered from conducting research, it's best to just get out of that situation and find someone who is more supportive of you. Because I can guarantee there is someone out there who will value you and your research and who wants you to be the best you can be.
Absolutely. And I think this is the best way to say, because what we have seen in research now, people dropping out their PhDs, committing all those things in some, we will not go that path, but for now I'll say that for all the young researchers, or even if you are doing your PhD, what Anisha mentioned is really, really important, that there is someone who can identify the potential in you. Probably you can flourish better in other labs. So if you feel that you are not getting the supportive environment what you need, drop it. Try to work as much as you can, but there has to be hard boundaries after which you'll say that, okay, you know what, I'm done. I'll try to put my efforts somewhere else, because at the end of the day, we all are humans. We all love to be praised. We all love to be acknowledged. There is only a part of this criticism which can go in and then you can see a constructive outcome out of that. But if it is not working, I think that is the thing where you say that, okay, you know what, I'm done. Let's start or move the group or the place or even sometimes the countries. So now we are coming to the edge of the conversation. I would like to say thank you so much, Anisha, for sharing this with the young researchers. And if they want to connect to you, they can directly write it to you. If they want Empowering Science Foundation to help us connect with our researcher celebrities, please feel free to write to us, and then we'll take you where you want. The only thing which we want from you is your commitment to research. If research is what makes you happy, we are there to help you. And all of our researcher celebrities like Anisha are there to help you too. With this, we'll say stay tuned for another episode of Researchers by saying thank you, Anisha.
Okay, thank you.